Kyle Busch, the hidden battle behind the helmet, the champion fighting a hidden battle. For years, Kyle Busch seemed like a force of nature on the racetrack. He was not just another driver filling a seat. He was a competitor who showed up every single weekend with a burning desire to dominate. The moment the green flag waved, something shifted in him. His focus sharpened, his instincts took over, and he drove with a level of aggression and precision that left rivals struggling to keep pace. He did not enter races hoping for a good result. He entered them expecting victory, and time after time, he delivered exactly that. His career grew into something truly remarkable. Race wins piled up. Championship titles followed. Records that stood for years were broken, and new ones were written in their place. Fans watched him take risks that made their breath catch, pushing his car into corners at speeds that seemed reckless to anyone else, but perfectly calculated to him. Whether people admired him or found his style difficult to accept, no one with any honest understanding of the sport could question what he brought to it. Kyle Busch was elite, and he proved it consistently over an extended period of time. From the outside, his life looked exactly the way a racing champion's life should look. Cameras followed him. Crowds erupted when his name was announced. Sponsors lined up to be associated with a driver who delivered results. The image he projected was one of total control, absolute confidence, and a career moving in only one direction. He appeared untouchable, a man fully in command of his destiny on and off the track. But underneath that polished surface, something very different was beginning to take shape. Away from the bright lights of race weekends and the roar of packed grandstands, a quiet and unwelcome change was unfolding in his life. At first, it did not seem significant. It appeared to be a minor physical issue, the kind of thing an athlete might brush off after a long and demanding season. Something manageable, something that rest and routine care might resolve without much disruption. However, as time passed, the situation refused to improve. Instead of fading, it grew. What had seemed like a small concern began to develop into something more complicated, more persistent, and far more troubling. Warning signs appeared, subtle ones that were easy to miss in the middle of a busy racing schedule, but warning signs nonetheless. They were there for those paying close enough attention, quietly building the background while the public face of Kyle Busch remained steady and strong. The weight of it grew heavier with each passing week. This was no longer something that could be quietly managed on the sidelines of a racing career. It was becoming a genuine challenge, one that would require real attention, real strength of a different kind, and a willingness to face something far more frightening than any competitor on a racetrack. As his professional life continued at full speed on one side, a deeply personal battle was quietly gaining ground on the other. The Watkins Glen radio call. There are moments in life that only reveal their true meaning in hindsight. At the time they happen, they blend into the background, appearing ordinary and unremarkable. But later, when the full picture comes into view, those same moments feel different. They feel heavier. They feel like signals that were always there, waiting to be understood. One such moment happened during a race weekend at Watkins Glen. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary day in a long and packed season. Drivers were pushing themselves and their cars to the edge, dealing with the physical and mental demands that come with high-speed competition. Heat, noise, stress, and exhaustion were constants, as they always are in motorsports. Nothing about the day appeared out of the ordinary at first. Then, over the team radio, Kyle Busch made a quiet but notable request. He asked for a doctor, specifically mentioning that he would need a shot of some kind. The delivery was calm, almost casual, which was exactly why it did not immediately raise alarm. In a sport where drivers regularly endure pain, fatigue, and discomfort without complaint, such a request could easily be filed away as routine. Athletes push through difficulty. That is part of what makes them athletes. So the moment passed without much weight attached to it. Most people listening processed it and moved on. The race continued. The focus returned to lap times and strategy, as it always does when the competition is live and the pressure is real. There was no dramatic pause, no visible sign of crisis, and no reason for anyone to believe that the moment carried any significance beyond the race day itself. Looking back now, however, that radio call feels far more meaningful. It reads less like a routine request and more like a quiet signal, a brief and understated glimpse of something difficult happening beneath the surface. In professional sports, Athletes are conditioned to minimize their struggles. The culture rewards toughness and penalizes vulnerability. Drivers especially learn early that showing weakness, even when the body is clearly asking for relief, is not something the environment encourages. Kyle Busch had always embodied that mentality more than most. His entire career was built on a refusal to back down, the determination to find another gear when others might ease off. It was a quality that earned him respect and results in equal measure. But that same quality also meant that early signs of trouble could pass by unnoticed, wrapped in the appearance of just another competitor pushing through a hard day. The question that moment eventually raised was a difficult one. Was it simply a race day issue, a small physical need in the middle of a tough weekend? Or was it the earliest visible sign of something much larger that was quietly developing, something that would only become fully visible when it was impossible to ignore any longer? Racing through illness. Even as his health concerns grew more present in his daily life, Kyle Busch did what defined him throughout his career. He kept racing. He showed up at the track, climbed into the car, fastened his harness, and went to work. For him, stepping away was never the natural response to difficulty. Racing was not just a profession. It was identity, and walking away from it, even temporarily, was not something he reached for easily. What made it remarkable to those watching closely was that he did not simply go through the motions. He remained competitive. Even while managing symptoms that would have sidelined many people entirely, he continued to match himself against the best drivers in the sport and hold his own. Lap after lap, he demonstrated the kind of mental and physical resilience that had carried him to the top of NASCAR across his career. For many observers, it was another chapter in the story of a driver who simply refused to surrender. Among fellow competitors, his reputation for complete commitment was well established. Kyle Busch raced with everything he had, every single time. He was aggressive, calculated, and deeply serious about performance. That approach had brought him extraordinary success, and it remained visible even during this difficult period. It was inspiring in one sense, a demonstration of willpower that went beyond what most people encounter in everyday life. At the same time, his decision to continue competing, while clearly unwell, began to spark a different kind of conversation within the sport. It raised questions that did not have straightforward answers. Where is the line between determination and recklessness? When does pushing through discomfort become a risk not just to the individual, but to everyone sharing the track? And perhaps most importantly, what does it say about the culture of a sport when an athlete feels that stepping back is simply not an option? For fans, the situation created a complicated mix of emotions. Admiration was genuine and understandable. Watching someone refuse to quit, even when facing real physical challenges, connects with something deep in how people understand strength and character. But alongside that admiration sat a growing unease. The harder someone has to fight just to keep going, the more serious the underlying situation must be. And that reality was becoming harder to look past. Behind the helmet, every driver who pulls on a helmet and slides into a race car carries more than a desire to win. They carry pressure that most people watching from the stands or at home will never fully appreciate. The results that fans see, the podiums and the penalties, are only the visible surface of something far more demanding and complex underneath. In NASCAR, the stakes attached to every race go far beyond the event itself. Point standings shift. Sponsor relationships are influenced by performance. Team decisions about driver lineups are made based on results accumulated across a season. One missed race can disrupt momentum. One poor stretch of results can change how a driver is perceived by the people who control their future in the sport. The seat inside the car is never truly secure, and every driver knows it. Fellow competitors have spoken openly about the reality that many athletes continue to race when they are far from physically healthy. Illness, injury, and exhaustion are managed quietly, treated as internal matters rather than legitimate reasons to withdraw. In a world where the competition for limited seats is constant, admitting that the body is struggling carries professional risk. Someone else is always ready to step in, and that knowledge sits in the back of every driver's mind during difficult moments. Kyle Busch's situation brought this reality into sharper focus. His choice to keep going, to keep showing up despite what he was dealing with privately, was not simply a personal decision. It was a reflection of the environment that professional motorsport creates, one where vulnerability is hidden and strength is performed regardless of what the reality actually is. His story became a window into something the sport does not often discuss openly: the cost of that culture and what it asks of the people inside it. From the track to a medical emergency, then everything changed. What had been unfolding quietly and gradually suddenly erupted into something that could no longer be contained or ignored. During preparations for yet another race weekend, the situation escalated in a way that shocked everyone around him. Reports confirmed that Kyle Busch began experiencing severe and frightening symptoms. It was no longer a matter of general fatigue or manageable discomfort. Serious breathing difficulties emerged, making ordinary moments a struggle. More alarmingly, there were reports of him coughing up blood, a symptom that removed any remaining doubt about the seriousness of what was happening. The people closest to him recognized immediately that this required urgent medical attention. Race preparations stopped. Car setup strategy and lap times became completely irrelevant in an instant. The entire focus shifted to getting him the care he needed as quickly as possible. He was transported for medical treatment, and what had been scheduled as another competitive weekend in NASCAR became something entirely different. For fans hearing the news, the shock was immediate and disorienting. Days earlier, he had still been racing. There had been no dramatic public signal that something of the severity was developing. The transition from competitor to medical emergency felt impossibly sudden, and people struggled to reconcile the two images. When the engines fell silent, in the aftermath, the world of NASCAR grew quiet in a way that felt completely unfamiliar. The sport built on noise and speed and relentless forward momentum found itself stopped, reflecting and mourning. Tributes appeared at racetracks. Moments of silence replaced the roar of engines. Drivers who had competed against Kyle Busch for years stood without words, unable to fully articulate what his absence meant. His story, which had always been told in terms of victories and records, now carried a different weight. It became something larger than sport. It became a reminder that behind every athlete performing at the highest level is a human being carrying pressures and struggles that the public rarely sees clearly. The conversations his story sparked went beyond racing. They touched on health, on the cost of ambition, on what happens when the culture of performance overrides the simple need to stop and take care of oneself. His journey became a mirror held up to sports at large, reflecting questions about how much we ask of the people we celebrate, and how little we often understand about what they're quietly enduring to meet those expectations. Kyle Busch's legacy now holds more than championship titles. It holds a story that asks every fan, every team, and every organization in professional sport to look more carefully at what lies beneath the surface, and to remember that the most important race anyone runs is not the one measured in laps.